We all know how serious and dreadful the current situation in Myanmar is. For those of us outside the country, it can be difficult to know how to help. Of course, there are significant ongoing needs across all segments of Burmese society. For those who are able to give financially, any donations given to our nonprofit mission, Better Burma, will immediately be put towards helping those being impacted by the coup. Just go to insightmyanmar.org/donation to contribute today, or stay tuned to the end of the episode to hear more options. Thank you for your consideration. And now, let's get into the interview that follows. Eh Nay Thaw, thank you for joining this episode of Insight Myanmar podcast. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Right. So you've had quite a journey in your life bringing you where we are today. Before we get to where you are now, let's go first to where it began. Can you tell us a bit about your upbringing?
Yes, absolutely. So my journey began from Karen hill tribe, live in the hill mountainside of eastern Burma, Karen state. I was born in there, and when I was 2 years old, after the fall of the de facto Karen state capital, the Manerplaw, in 1995, the eastern side of Karen state experienced intensified armed conflict between the Burmese military and the Karen armed groups. And so when the war intensified, our village came under attack by the Burmese military because we live in resistance area, commonly known as liberated area nowadays. And so because of that, we became the collateral damage of chronic armed conflict between the Burmese and the Korean armed forces. And so in 97, my family, my mom and I and my older brother had to flee across to Thailand and eventually became refugees. And we live in refugee camp. Mine was called Tamhi Refugee Camp. And I lived there for 10 years. And after living there for 10 years, I had the opportunity to resettle here in the United States back in 2007. So when we resettled here in the United States, my family and I have ever since lived here in the U.S. So now I'm currently live in the United States, specifically in Kentucky, working with the refugee resettlement. So as we go on, talk and explore more about my career path. And yeah, overall, families for current state, Burma, became refugees, live in camp for 10 years, and then now live in the United States as the Burmese Korean diaspora.
Right. That's quite a story. You referenced the fall of Manerplaw and your village being in the attack lines and so having to escape to a refugee camp. How old were you at that time?
Yeah, so I was a little kid, a little bit younger than 2 years old. I don't remember much.
Right.
Because of that, thankfully, I don't remember much, because if I do, it would be a lot of pain and suffering. But at the same time, I do hear quite a lot of stories from my mother and also other Koreans who I live among. Hear lots of horror stories of the journey from running, fleeing the Burmese military in the jungle, deep in the eastern side of current state in the jungle, where food was scarce, clean waters, medicines were all scarce at the time. And I remember my mom who told me stories of elders or sick people who, in the process of running away from the Burmese military in the jungle, were deceased because of malnourished, because of other diseases like malaria, and also lack of modern medicines that can prevent them from dying. So a lot of folks, elderly, children, women, die on the road as they flee the Burmese military. And at that time, the fall of Manerplaw was the turning point for the Korean resistance movement. It was a major blow to the Korean resistance group. And when the fall of Manerplaw, hundreds, in thousands of folks became refugees across the Thai-Burma border. And I happen to be one of the few hundred thousands in the Thai-Burma border who grew up in refugees as a child. So, yeah.
And of course, you were 2 years old, so you don't remember much of that yourself, but you mentioned hearing stories. I know there are risks in retelling some of those stories and going through, living through that past trauma. At the same time, I'm balancing that with listeners who genuinely just don't know about what that reality was. And part of this podcast platform is to try to speak honestly and directly to uncovering the reality of suffering that so many people have gone through at the hands of the Burmese military. And so I wonder if of these stories that you've heard, if there's one that stands out that you might be comfortable sharing, knowing with the caveat of knowing that I don't want to. I know sometimes just simply recalling something or remembering something, even if it's something you've heard and you haven't lived through, that can itself bring back that trauma. Yet at the same time, it can also, bringing that harsh reality can educate an audience that might not simply understand. So I wonder if there's a story that you would feel comfortable going into, keeping that balance in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I am grateful that, yes, despite the horror and the trauma and the pain that retelling story can bring to one or can trigger one, personally, I thankfully through this journey that I have experienced, I am comfortable retelling stories of suffering around me personally that I have gone through, and mainly because after living in the United States for so long, part of my goal is advocated for the Korean people and other ethnic groups that are persecuted by the Burmese military regime. And through that journey of advocacy, of storytelling, and of sharing the past of persecutions and oppressions, I found that journey, while it's difficult to retell this story, while doing that, I find also space for reflection and healing. It is through healing that I'm able to retell stories of friends and families being killed on sight, or others being cut off, mutilated of certain body parts. And the story that I heard from my Korean friends, families around me are not uncommon. And that is because this story of our ethnic groups as minority in Burma being persecuted by the Burmese military is of experience by other ethnic minorities, especially the Rohingya or the Karenni or the Kachin or the Chin. This stuff, these stories, this experience or a collected shared stories. And now, since the military coup, we are also reading and seeing, observing for our Burmese counterparts of similar stories, all the brutality, all the military killing the youth, women, men on site, mutilations or brutal attacks against peaceful protests. These stories are, to some extent, I'm not going to say I'm numb to it, but it becoming more well known and well experienced by so many other people. And so telling this story, recounting this story, also provide a space for reflection and healing, and also a source of moving forward, become our story, our experience become a source of our strength, that the ongoing fighting injustice is a continuous journey. And so for me, I use this personal experience as somebody who grew up in a refugee camp, have very little to eat. Did they have the childhood that we envisioned for children here in my community here in Kentucky, or envision in modern society, right? Despite not having what a children should have, not having the life that children should have, I found that journey to also serve as a source of motivation, a source of inspirations for myself and for others to continue to share stories of modern day persecutions of people just like you and I want to live peacefully in harmony and in with security. And so to me, that is what I continue to tell others, despite some time in bring back memories. I find it also it's also a necessity to share with others of the stories.
Right, that's very true, and I understand that's also relates to the work that you're doing. So you were able to escape and made it to a refugee camp in the Burma-Thai border, and stayed there, as I understand it, 10 years before moving on to America and Kentucky more specifically. You basically grew up and had your childhood in the refugee camp. I imagine some of your first memories were there. I imagine that for any child, whatever situation you're going through, there's a kind of normalization process. Whatever you're experiencing, that's what feels normal because you don't really know the other ways of being. And so your early years were, formative years were all spent there. So what was it? What do you remember about growing up in the refugee camp and your experience as a young child coming into the world, that this for a decade, this was all you knew?
Yes, I happen to be one of those kid who grew up with vivid memories of past experience, and also visualize things, to memorize things and to remember things, and to carrying the memories of the past. I'm more of somebody who carry vivid images rather than the numbers or others whatnot, right? And so I happen to remember when I was a little boy, perhaps about 3 years old, out there on the field, perhaps because the camp is, it used to be like, it used to be mountains, it used to be trees all over the jungle with bushes, all that. But when the Thai official locate folks to move to the now known as Tamil refugee camp, I remember vividly that people were scattered everywhere, and were scattered everywhere, seated everywhere. Some on the floor, on the ground, on the dirt floor, some standing. Looked like it's a huge mess where we knew absolutely no idea what's going to happen. And I remember so vividly, Thai security vehicle came to camp with their a siren light. And as they passed, I remember many people were following it. Some kids were chasing it. Me, on the other hand, I remember this pack of food I have my mom packed. So the bag was a plain plastic bag. In it, it's a rice fried with oil and perhaps ginger powder, because it's the color is very vivid, and so it must have been ginger color. And so that's all I had. It was my on my hand was a bag of rice, ready to be eaten. There was nothing else. Other than that, some stories retold by my mother. Uh, so many people needed immediate medical attention, especially elders who were so weak and vulnerable, having to lay down on the floor, on anywhere they can find rest, right? And around this time, the Thai government did not sign. They never signed a United Nations refugee treaty that are responsible for refugees. So they are not obligated to accept refugees, and so it was time of fear of what of uncertainty, because Thai government are not responsible to accept refugees, and they can move and force us anytime back to across the border, which they have done historically. They have done it so many times. They have done it before the coup, the 2021 coup. They have done it post that, and there were fears that we might be forced to return back to Burma, and so we have to pack light. We can't carry much. We have to carry whatever we can carry on our hand. And I was a little boy, so my mom was carrying me most of the time, and my brother, who was 3, almost 4 years old at the time, walking. And so that was my very first memory of refugee camp. And going forward, thankfully, we were settled there, lived there, and grew up there as a kid.
So, in hearing that as well, like I know when you're going through that experience as a child, there's one normalizes whatever that experience is and doesn't realize there could be differences. And yet, when you then move through your childhood and as you have done, you have gone far beyond the refugee camp of the Thai-Burma border and to the U.S. and learned so much more about the way the world works and the way that the Tatmadaw and the Burmese military have worked and what they've done to the Karen. Your views have expanded so much. And so then when you take your adult's view, your worldly view, your educated view that you've developed in your years since, and when you look back at your memories of being in the refugee camp, do you ever have feelings of things that were happening at the time that you were going through them that you were just kind of normalizing and as accepting as this is just how the world is, or this is what, how I live, or this is the way things are? And then with that reflection of many years and many experiences since, that you look back on what happened in the refugee camp and you've found, wow, that's really shocking. This was so normal to me at the time, but this was not normal. This shouldn't happen. Are there any incidences or just overall experiences during those 10 years that stand out that way?
Yes, I mean, number one, we live in Thailand as refugees, right? So we did not have rights. As there were basic rights that were not granted to us. For instance, the right to speak freely, right? We did have that, and so I grew up thinking that and believing that us as ethnic Korean people living in Thailand, best thing we could do to ourselves is to obey, and that is to obey community leaders, parents, community leaders, elders, especially Thai authority. We were told to strictly obey orders and do not ask a question. And so this is sort of not only in the Easter tradition, but also, especially when you are not a citizen of a country, you do not question what is being told to you. And so overall, majority of refugee grow up learning to believing that whatever one say, you must follow it, and that is conditioned in our family, in our community, in our school, and then the whole camp, right? And so, what for one instance, I give you one instance. Are We are being told to do whatever we are told to do, even if by the Thai authority. And so, because of this, because we are conditioned to follow orders, whenever the Thai security order, we must follow it. And so, for instance, like growing up, if there is a concern in the community, if we have to, and there's curfew imposed for some other reasons, if even you want to stay up late, play around with kids, or as a kid play around with others, and you'll be told to go to sleep early, you have to go to sleep early, or if not, at least turn off the light at say 9 p.m. And so these are common occurrence where if the order comes for higher up, we must follow it. And we take it for granted that be able to speak for oneself, to be able to think for oneself is something that it's all right. But to certain places, you can't even express your disagreement, especially when you are not a citizen of a country like Thailand. And Thai authority have ways of believing that they are superior in comparison to non-citizen folks, and that is why, in terms of issue regarding to corruptions and brutality, we heard that often. We know that that happened often because folks, security folks, police at the border practically do whatever they feel like doing, especially when they are not in front of the superior, right? Say they are somewhere else that's not direct contact to the superiors. And so I grew up believing that the moment I step outside of the camp perimeter, anytime I see or hear a vehicle or motorcycle that I suspect it could be a Thai official, especially security guard or police, I run away as quickly as possible. I remember vividly, me and my friends were going vegetable foraging. We went to forage vegetable around the camp, and we were a group of 9. And as we were approaching the on the road, and we hear a vehicle approaching, we did not question once whether this vehicle is belong to security personnel or a civilian vehicle. As soon as we hear that vehicle approaching, we took off from the street and ran to the bush as quickly as possible. And the bushes are not just ordinary bush. We talk about sometimes because it's a hilly place, so the road on the hill. When they're on the hill, it's about up to 50, sometimes 80 feet tall, sometimes even longer, depends on the hill. And we just jump off that hill and roll our body like a rock and run as quickly as possible. And when that happened and the adrenaline rush, you don't remember much, but I remember having to run through, jump off the cliff often. And after that, after running away, and you look at yourself and your arm, your legs, all cut it with grass or bushes or thorns or whatsoever. And often we have scars. We grew up having scar as its normal thing. So that's one thing, right? Dealing with security. Another thing is that because we live in the isolated place with rudimentary irrigation, so we do have to wake up every morning. For me, especially as one of the elder child in the family, 5 a.m. every morning, regardless of the season of the day of the month. We have to wake up every day in the morning, 5 a.m. to go and collect water at the centralized location and bring back home. Whether Christmas, whether New Year or holiday, there's no such a thing. We have to wake up every day at 5 a.m. to be able to collect enough water for our family. And yeah, we do really take this stuff for granted because that's how we were taught. We have to earn everything that we receive. You have to earn it, or else it's not gonna be given to you. Other than, of course, the United Nations program, United Nation food program that offer a portion of rice or beans or oil every month. Those are stuff that already given. But what's not given is additional resource that you had to acquire to be able to get it. And so, as a kid, I lived and grew up in environments that no children should grow up in. I don't remember having the childhood that I see the children here are having. And so, because of that experience, I became mature quickly. At the age of 12, I look after my younger brothers, sisters. I have to pretty much parent them, take care of them, have to do additional chores. And so you become sort of the adults in the family because those are the stuff that we do not necessarily have, like here in the United States. And so I normalize having to be the adult as a younger children. I normalize having to follow orders, have to obey everything that is being said. I normalize not questioning. I normalize just to even have nothing to have little to nothing to eat. And it was common that when it comes to food, there's never ever going to be enough. And so that's what my childhood was.
That's a lot to share, and some really horrific, difficult things to have to understand and have to hear, and certainly have to live through. One of the things that really strikes me in that description is just describing this sense of powerlessness. And obviously that powerlessness partly comes from statelessness, from even, you could say, identitylessness, and just kind of having to flee and float, and just not having the sense of rights. And as you describe it, whether it's the Bamar military organization, the Tamada, whether it's the Thai authorities or the camp directors, the United Nations, or even whether it's the elders and who are leading the movement in the Karen community, there's this sense you describe of not only not having your own voice, but not even really having a right to your voice. That just this sense of submission to what the authority is and not wanting to stand out beyond that. And yet today, in hearing you, and there's a lot to fill in the gaps there, but in hearing you on this interview, I think that listeners will very much hear a person that very much has a voice and very much is able to speak for and against this or that, and to have opinions and to take action and everything else. And so you obviously have found your voice and have confidence in expressing it, and yet you're describing a stage in your life where you did not, where you're the defining characteristic of those years was the lack of having this voice and having to submit it to whoever the authority was at the time. And so that begs the question, how did this development take place? How did you go from someone where your experience was defined by a lack of a voice into the person you are now, where your voice is so strong and so clear and powerful in terms of what you believe and what you want to express? How did that transition and transformation take place?
Yeah, so when I was in third grade, my teacher go around the classes asking, when you grow up, who do you want to be? And so, as somebody who grew up in refugees, that question is really, really, really difficult to answer due to the limited potential of, say, a career, but also easy to answer because it would almost set it done that regardless what you choose, you're gonna end up living in refugee camp, and not to live to your full capacity, but to live just to survive. So I remember my teacher asked me, "Who do you want to be?" And reflecting on my experience, I hear some folks, students say, "I want to be a teacher," which is a very common job for people growing up there. If say they pass 10th grade in this case, or pass junior college. Some say teacher, some say nurse, some say doctors. When we say doctor, we're talking about like rudimentary, very basic field of medical profession. And then others say want to be soccer players just to play for fun. Some say want to be a butcher. Some say want to do lumbers. But in my case, I say I want to be a soldier. I want to join the resistance movement. And it's also a common choice of children. We're talking about 3 years old, right? I mean, not 3 years, third graders when asked this question. And I say I want to be join soldiers, and the teacher asked why. Why is that? And that is solely because I reflect on my experience. As a Korean, your home or being in your hometown, you native it down. In my case, my house, my home, my village, the whole village was burnt down by the Burmese military. Thinking myself as somebody who will fight to resist that authority, that can think that they can do whatever they want to do or whatever they like to do, I cannot accept that. So I think that I thought about it and say I want to be a soldier, so that way I will make it a little bit challenging, a little bit difficult for these military soldiers to come in, burn down or torture whoever they want. So I want to make it a little bit harder for them. So I say I want to be a soldier, and that's not because I truly, truly want to be a soldier, but because there is nothing else that I thought would be more excited to do or more fun to do. and more meaningful to do. So I say I want to be a soldier. And then, so just being a soldier, of course, I can be with amongst my Korean comrades, share that story of so many who have gone before us, serve as a, if not a protector of a resistance for resilience people, telling the Burmese soldiers that they cannot and they will not do whatever they want to do. And so I was dead set I was going to be a soldier, fighting the military regime. And so that was my roadmap as long as I live in refugee camp. But then in 2007, 2006, when the United States offered a resettlement program here in the U.S., that took a drastic turn in my life. And so when we resettled here, my goal was to still be a soldier, but this time the United States. I want to join the U.S. Army at the time when I was teenager, and I worked very hard for it in high school to prepare myself to join the military. However, as I continue to explore that journey, my community here, my church especially, and my youth leaders and the folks that I surrounded myself with, thought that I could do more by going to school and not necessarily join the military. And so I wasn't interested in doing more. Interested in dead set, go to serve in the military and then return to Kothule. That's how we call current state, Kothule, and share my experience here in the U.S. military with my fellow current soldiers. Then the politics in Burma have changed. If you remember back in 2010 when Aung San Suu Kyi was released from prison, Burma charted to a new territory at the time, or normalized, moving progressive to democratic state. At least at the time that the international community, international expert and scholars argue, right? And it was charted to it was changing its course from the feudal, from the isolated hermit kingdom that Burma was once known. And it was exciting time for resistant movement. It was exciting time for democratic activists and those that wants to see change in Burma. And I thought, well, maybe I might not, my military skill might not need it in there, but perhaps something else. So I, at least I can contemplate on this and then tell myself I have choice. I have full power over myself, control over myself, where I want to go next, right? Especially in the United States, when you ask kid, who do you want to be? There are so much potential. There are so much option. There are endless options one can tell oneself and then execute it to become that person. And so for me, when I question, reevaluated my and reflect on my experience, and then moving forward, I knew it. I was not going to be in the military anymore. I knew I want to do something that is not violent, something that is more, for lack of a better word, more not violent resistance. And so I contemplated on it, and then I decided to go to school. Got into a pretty good college, and study classes that I want to study, so that can help me with my future career. And so that just having the ability to choose to become who you want to be and do what you want to do was something that I'll never take it for granted, because reflecting on my life as a kid growing in refugee camp, I didn't have that choice. I didn't have much choices. But now that here, and now that I am living in the United States, getting a decent college uh, uh, education, this is where I have a voice to chart into whichever journey I want to go into. So I began to involve in advocacy with my community and with the Korean community over all over the U.S. Advocated for bills that would support democratic movement in Burma, and not only I get to do that, but also get a return back to go through the current state, and serve with groups like environmental group, KISA, Career Environmental Social Action Network Group, and also work with folks on the ground who are doing crucial work, upholding human rights and international law. So just get it reflected on that and having a voice of my own, and not have a voice but can take action that could help the people of Burma. I found that very empowering and very uplifting.
Yeah, I think absolutely that is. And you describe how one of the first things that you wanted to do when you were asked what you wanted to become was in the resistance. And being able to defend your villages, defend your people, that's very tragic to hear. It also is very reasonable considering what you had gone through and how you wanted to seek self-preservation and really just wanting to punch a bully in the face and to be able to prevent against that aggression. It also makes me wonder, your early life was characterized by such victimhood on the part of the Burmese military, the Tamada, and then the Thai authorities who administered the refugee camps. And I just can't imagine how many incidences, probably more than can be recalled, more than want to be recalled, and how many years of those instances were characterized really by being under the sway of this bully and having in order to survive and to have some sense of stability, having to quiet oneself and just kind of do what was needed to survive while these aggressors had their way. And so this is a pretty deep question, personal, so answer as far as you feel comfortable. But when I hear that, it just makes me wonder, when I think about, or to back up a moment, when I think about my own life, which has been, I have to acknowledge, has been quite privileged in terms of what I've had to face and the challenges I've gone through. But when I think about some of the worst things that people have done to me and some of the greatest anger I've had at perceived acts of injustice and ways that I've suffered unjustly, and as I see it, under the hands of this person's actions or this, it's definitely, I have a lot of contempt towards that person I have to work through and have to it's something I don't want to hold inside me. I want to get over, but there's some things that have happened that are I think, no matter who you are and what privilege you've had, you've gone through some experiences that have been painful and traumatic and feel wronged. And the experiences I've gone through that have harmed me the most are don't even hold a candle to what it's like having your village destroyed and people murdered in an ethnic region of Myanmar, or having to live in a refugee camp because of that, where then you have these Thai authorities that are acting another way. So even in some of the encounters, the unpleasant encounters I've had to really work at looking at that contempt and trying to let go of it and really holding on to that grudge, that anger, and sometimes bordering into hatred and feeling that toxicity. And so I'm wondering for you, given the depths of what you face, which are so far beyond anything I've encountered and probably many of these listeners, how have you worked with that? To what degree, and as far as you're willing to share, have you felt that burning fire of hatred and contempt? And to what degree and how and if have you worked to try to take that and transform it into something else?
So my personal experience informed me of the stories of the elders. The way I say the story of the elder, it's the ancient Quran or Qurans who have come before us, that live between two great empires: the Thai Empire, the Siam Thailand, commonly modern day called Thailand, and then Burma. Burma and Thailand are historical enemies, and they are two ancient rivalry who continue to invade each other territory, fight each other, and try to occupy each other land territory. Right, from our current oral history and written history, the Karen folks resettled first in Lower Burma prior to Burmese to modern day Burma, and the story that often be told is that the Karen migrated from the Gobi Desert in Mongolia to modern day Tibet to Burma prior to other major ethnic resettlement in modern day Burma. And because if you look at the location of where the Karen people are situated in Thailand, Western Thailand, Burma, Eastern Burma, in Burma, also in the Delta, the area where they also have large population of Korean in the west, southwest of Burma, right? And so the story that, or elder is that we have settled here first in this land. We call it Kola. And as ethnic group, we didn't need armed and build an army because it's the most peaceful land our ancestors have experienced. And so, however, later on, empire follow and invade other land, conquer other people, and because we happen to live before two major nation empire, the Khmer Empire, the Thailand side of the Thailand kingdom, and then the Burmese kingdom, we were our ancestors were caught in between two great arch enemies, and because of that, they were used as slaves, they were persecuted, they were used as slave to build the two great empire mountain. And so the Quran, having to live between the two nations, have the ongoing continuation of the Quran, persecution of the Quran, and the Qurani, and the Qurani also consider the Quran too. They will call the Red Quran. They are the subgroup of the Quran, and so the ongoing continuation of persecution between the by the Burmese regime and then the Thai military is what informed me of the past. So I learned the story of persecution, oppression, brutality of my ancestors through my own personal experience because I myself know this. We lived in Burma, in modern day Burma, as native indigenous people, often called the hill tribe people, and they having to flee to Thailand. And we know folks from Thailand cross back to Burma often, right? And because of this, when it comes to the persecutions or victimhood of the Quran, I don't question the ancient story of people being persecuted. I don't question that because personally I went through it myself. And so, yes, a lot of people because of this experience often end up joining a fierce resistance group and live their life to fight, live their life to resist by any means. And so it makes sense, right, that the Quran, especially in the resistant territory, their whole life is fighting the military because oral storytellers that if we don't fight, they're going to do the same thing to us. So because of this, I also held grudges and anger of the military as a kid. And even like I could not hear the word Biyor, which means the Burmese. Because we live in ethnic territory, we don't interact with Burmese citizens. And the only Burmese we interact with or get to heard about is the military. And the image of the Burmese is not pretty. The Burmese military the poorly job of presenting the Burmese people, the Burmese civilians. And because of that, we have really bad image of the Burmese people. And even the word Burmese itself is antagonized by the Karen because, when we say Burmese, the Burmese military, they are the Burmese, of course. And so I grew up thinking that the Burmese are the bad guy. And because they are the bad guy, I cannot tolerate Burmese language. I cannot tolerate Burmese culture. I cannot tolerate even here in the Burmese, or I can't like our class even teaches Burmese class. And as a kid, I was so angry at the school for teaching. I was so angry at the school for teaching or providing Burmese classes because We ran away from the Burmese. Why do we have to learn the Burmese, right? Whereas our language or being removed from the system because of that, I did held grudges and anger against the Burmese, the name Burmese, the idea of the concept of Burmese identity. That's brought not only my personal experience but also the people that around me. And I heard so many stories of people, parents would allow the kid to speak Burmese because their personal experience far worse than us growing up in a refugee camp. And so it wasn't easy for me to let go of that anger or that grudges against another Burmese because of that personal experience until I came to the United States, where through social studies, through church program, through conflict resolutions program, many programs that I have attended teaches about reconciliation, about this case forgiveness in the church, about letting go of the past and moving forward. It takes it I would say it take a long time until I learned that what the Burmese military did to us, the Burmese citizens, the Burmese people have nothing to do with it. Because they themselves are the victim of this patriarchal Burmese led military regime. And it took a long time, I'll say, to convince my own self that Burmese people are not to be blamed, but the military junta, those in power, are to be blamed. And it wasn't easy. I went through a conflict resolution program led by university. I studied. I went to school to study government because that was my. I want to understand why state go to war with its own people. And so I study state, I study political parties, I study conflict in social study, the issue between the civil rights movement, the conflict in South Africa. And so it was through serious academic study journey that I learned to forgive myself, not to hold grudges, anger against the perpetrator of my people and my personal and family. And yeah, so even today, I the word Burmese, when I go to media and Burmese is be used as the language, even though the Korean are attended as the majority, I still it's still a trigger to me, and I have to be conscious, be aware that it's it's that these are the Burmese people are not the fault, are not their fault. It is the military. So yeah, I would say that it was a long journey to be able to say that to be able to be where I'm at because yeah, it wasn't that easy journey.
Yeah, I can imagine. And thank you for sharing that so openly and vulnerably about that inner journey. And hearing that, it makes me think right now of what we've been talking about before this interview for the last several weeks, of this idea of either a podcast series or perhaps just a series of conversations between you and other ethnicities in Myanmar, as well as the wider diaspora that's exploring these issues, and it really brings to life and underlies how truly invaluable and important those kind of conversations would be. Because as I hear you talking, you're describing this really terrible and gut-wrenching inner journey combined with academic study and probably discourse and dialogue and maybe even spiritual practice and so many other things that is bringing you to a kind of salvation of not hating not just the specific people or organization, meaning soldiers or top Tatmadaw that have done this for you, but hating the entire Bamar group that has been responsible for this immense suffering that your people have gone through. And as I'm saying that, the one thing that just comes to mind in my own personal experience is coming from a Jewish family that lost our whole line of family in the Holocaust in Europe, and I was basically the third generation removed from that. My grandparents actually lived through that and experienced that loss, and my mother was as a child growing up was born to that, and then I was the next generation. And so just being a part of that in my own family, and and my grandparents were just such saintly, remarkable, wonderful people, but they were not cool with Germans, Germans as a nationality. And it was something that I would often push back as a younger person, and kind of try to, educate them on the importance of being able to not hold on to that, and to be able to overcome that. And as the years went by, I began to realize that was as much as that might be nice to say and to believe, I simply hadn't lived what they had lived through. And so it wasn't quite my place to be telling them how they should feel about something, given the pain and trauma they went through. And and you're in that position of having gone through that pain and trauma directly yourself, and having experienced that suffering directly yourself, of being victimized in your own life by this group of people. And so even though all Germans are not Nazis, and certainly Germans that are generations removed from Nazi Germany are certainly not Nazis, so also all Bamar people are not in the Tamada or supporters of the Tamada. That looking at greater complicity and passivity, those are definitely things to look at. But this becomes a much more nuanced view. I mean, one just certainly cannot issue a blanket statement that the Germans are Nazis, and that the Bamar are Tamada sympathizers or apologists or whatnot. There's certainly much more nuance there. And so you're describing this this really rough inner journey that you had to go through to get to the other side, and to be able to find that sweet spot of balance where you're able to use your strong voice to advocate for the rights of others, to speak out against the wrongs and the ills and the evils the Tamada are doing, to have that courage and self-sacrifice and bravery and everything else to be able to do that, yet also being careful with your speech so that you're speaking ethically and correctly and accurately, and not then taking your pain and having others suffer as a result by association. And that was something that you had to go through all these ways, through academic study, through inner reflection, through conversation with others, et cetera, et cetera. And that just kind of makes me think about the value of having these kinds of conversations, the value of being able to reach out to people of other ethnicities, Bamar as well, and among yourselves, who are all in this, directly involved in this country and society, which I am not. I am an outsider. To be able to have that direct conversation, one just thinks about how powerful and impactful that is, not just on a direct level of you and the guest or a panel of people discussing, but especially for those listening, for those outsiders like me who can be educated and informed by it, as well as by so many people that are in some stage of that journey, some stage of that pain, that suffering, and not knowing how to get to the other side, and just hearing that as a model. So I guess the question I leave you with all this reflection is just kind of thinking about what do you find is the state of many of, and I know this is a very blanket question to ask, so just go with it and take it where you want based on your own experience of yourself and those you talk to. But if you could just characterize something of the basic state of what many different ethnicities, Karen as well as whatever else you've come in contact with from Myanmar, that this process that they have to go through, and there's no guidebook, there's no program, there's no real teacher, this process that one has to go through to not hate, to be whole, to be complete, and yet still to advocate and to speak out for what's wrong, and speak out against what's wrong, and how do you envision, or how do you see that that there could be a light shown on this inner process and support given to this inner process. Because if we don't figure out a way to respond to or manage this process effectively, it's just going to keep going on. There needs to be a resolution. There needs to be a way to talk and to explore and to come to center somehow in being able to find this common ground, share these experiences, to open, to listen through those difficult, painful, sensitive areas. There needs to be a way to have those kinds of outer communication and conversations and inner reflections and contemplations to be able to come out of what is just a horrible sense of trauma. So as someone who's gone through that yourself on an individual level, what are your thoughts on what needs to happen or could happen to be able to help out in the process in local ways, individually, in communities and groups, with the hopes that that will lead to something much more on of a whole society or community or nation that can have a transformative effect in what we hope is a post-Tamada Myanmar of rewriting the script and the history of what's been known since colonial times, since Bamar kingdom times? How can your own individual process and journey that you've taken help to educate you on and all of us on what can happen in something a bit broader and bigger to helping that process of others who are perhaps at different stages of the journey than you?
Yes, so I don't think there is a roadmap to learning to forgive your former persecutor. There's no roadmap to allowing yourself to see your former perpetrator and say, "I don't see you as I used to see you." You know, there's no clear or straight roadmap to that. And for me, like I said, it took me, I say, my whole life to be able to stand where I'm at today because of the transformative experience that I had throughout my, especially during my college years. Prior to that, I did learn about reconciliations, forgiveness, and allowing to let go of past through spiritual practice, through churches, through summer programs where we had speakers who went through the Vietnam War, where the Americans were their enemies, right? I heard stories for others who share their personal experience of reconcile with the perpetrator, and there were a series of conversation engagement with these scholars and teachers, and also through reading a religious texture, right? Text. And so that was personal journey to learn to understand how one's able to move forward, let it go, and be able to reconcile with their former enemies, right? And so for me, a turning point in my life was in 2015 when I returned back to Burma. There is strong contrast between the Burmese military and the Burmese people. And when I returned back to Burma, I went to there for an internship at Yangon. I taught English to high school and middle school students who came from all ethnic background, and it was in fact the most diverse group of people I have ever been with. We had Kachin, we have Kachin students, we have Kachin Chin students, we have Kaya, Karenni students, Karen. We also have Shan students. So, and it was the most diverse group of people. And we are also my partner, my co teacher was happened to be a Jew too, and so have background in the Jewish community. And so it was I look and reflect on that experience, and we decided to go on a field trip together, and we went to Burma museum in Yangon. I'm not sure I believe it was the National Museum, right? And so we went to see very The museum had portions of ethnic culture, symbols, and clothes and whatnot, right? And so it was, metaphorically speaking, some of us had complete different background and past. At the same time, we came together as a group of students who just want to learn the language English and explore the Burmese history, while we shared different ethnic background. But what I found healing in that experience of my 2 months experience teaching the language, English language, to Burmese and other students, was that engagement through personal engagement, through school, through learning, and through get it to expose ourselves through different people. What I found that experience meaningful and transformative was that I didn't see a Burmese or a Chin or Kachin or Karenni. What I see was people just like you and I wanted to live in harmony, want to live in peace and security, want to have a bright future for themselves and perhaps the future children, right? And in for that, English skill was essential to these folks. And so I personally did not have the same image or thoughts as once had of the Burmese as I once did. And so through that field trip and throughout my whole 2 years, which I also get to travel to Shan State and then to Pathane, what I learned was that the people of Burma are very much similar to you and I. We are similar in so many ways. There's shared common humanity in our experience together, because this short, brief period that this semi-democratic government allowed us to have was so much meaningful, and to me that was so transformative. Just get it to converse with my Burmese or my Karenni or my Chin counterpart. We even have Muslim students in our class who came from Western Burma, and so to me that was such a meaningful and transformative experience. And by having that experience, I did not see a race or ethnicity anymore there. All I see was people just like you and me. We want to learn, and we sing song together, we cook together, we eat together, and that experience alone break that invincible wall that we often draw upon ourselves, impose upon ourselves when we order Burmese or Korean or Chin, right? And so to me, that was a healing experience, a transformative experience. That was the first time through that personal experience, my perceptions of the Burmese changed dramatically. Secondly, when I stayed in a youth hostel in the center of Yangon, not too far from Sule Pagoda, and my hotel owner was a Burmese, but employee were Karen. They grew up in Yangon, speak mostly in Burmese with minimal Karen. But just the fact that my hostel was a Karen, uh, I I fell in love. I fell in love with the city Yangon because of so many people that I never thought I will come across. I came across in that short, brief amount of times. So to me, that was engagement, informal, formal, informal. That was crucial in turning points in my life of how I view the larger Burmese people. Secondly, also through serious academic and intellectual studies, where I learned how to let go of the past and move forward with my more inclusive view of the Burmese society. And so, what I have learned was this through personal journey: if somebody who still hate others based on their race, or say in this case ethnicity, it tells me that that person haven't healed him or herself yet. That person still hold grudges because that person have not healed through heal his past trauma and experience. And so what it tells me is that that person still have room and space for to forgive him or herself. I learned to let go of my past because I learned to forgive myself, and I learned to forgive my former perpetrator. And it was that learning to understand more about my feeling, my emotion, its core, its root, was crucial to let it go of past anger and hatred. And so it was, yeah, there's no roadmap for it. Like I said, it was it's a journey that one had to go through alone, and one have to genuinely want to go through it and learn from it, and then come out as somebody who would want to see a brighter world, a brighter society for all others. And to me, it was a serious reflections, meditations, breathing exercise, and reading, writing, reflections, and all that I went. It's to me, it was sometimes it was a long journey. And when I came out of that, some of my friends who speak of the Burmese in a very ill will, it tell me that yes, it has nothing to do with the Burmese. Maybe it does from your past experience, from the Burmese military, but also for that person point of view wise, I understand that within that person there's still illness in that person. So yeah, that's how I became to understand how one anger can turn into conflict as such. So to me, it was that personal experience that I learned to understand why conflict exists and why there's room and space for hope, reconciliation.
Thanks for that. That's wonderful. That's really inspiring to hear about that journey you went on to get to where you are now. I'd like to turn now to your own community. We've been talking a bit about everyone else, the Burmese, the military, the Thais here in America, the other ethnicities, and just concentrate and better understand the Karen community. This is of course, in the Karen community, it's divided by religion. There's Buddhists and Christians. There's many different political groups and armed groups associated with those political groups as well. And there are also many different ethnicities and languages within the Karen community itself. And largely, unfortunately, tragically, because of the violence that's been perpetuated on them by the Burmese military, the Karen people are scattered, are located all around. They don't have there's not a real safe homeland that they have at the moment. They're of course in Myanmar and Thailand and the camps. And then there's this huge diaspora in places of course, Kentucky and especially Minneapolis. There's especially strong communities. So there's this Karen identity of the larger Karen community, but then this gets broken down in so many geographical and ethnic and religious, cultural, linguistic kinds of ways. So I wonder if you can just give us kind of a crash course in, what it means to be Karen. Maybe first by what it means to you to be Karen, because you can only really respond to that statement with a real personal reflection of what your own Karen identity means, and then just going into the wider Karen community and whatever you might like to educate or inform about this Karen community, what defines them and who they are, to an audience that might not be so familiar with them.
Yes. So when it comes to division, it is a chronic, long issue that dated. You can say dated prior to British colonization. When it comes to divisions amongst the Karen, it's prevalent. It's everywhere, and exists practically everywhere you go. There's a Karen community. There's division, and you might want to ask, why is that? Why that is the case? And for me, as somebody who be observing the division amongst the Karen, Karen people are easily can for or susceptible to divisions. And number one is because Korean folks highly value personal character as a leader. Say somebody that have strong personal characteristic, and that person, they put high trust into that person. So sort of identity politics, where anyone that you deem that is closest to your values and your principle, that person you're more likely to align yourself with. Whereas that person is to have a different religion or to have a different principle or values, that easily can break down into faction. And the main reason that is because the Korean people often don't confront differences. And the differences are as simple as, I don't like your red color shirt. We don't express it. Korean people have ways of sugarcoating differences or disagreement by avoiding it, and it rooted in our culture that it can it function if there is number less than, say, average village. Imagine there's like 50 or 100. It can exist very cohesively. It that number can allow space for cohesive. But once that numbers of people becoming a little bit more diverse, people are vulnerable to factions. But to me, as a Korean person, and this is we haven't got into the religions or the language or the locations of where one lives, right? We have to get into that because those are more reason to break people apart. But to me, as a Korean person, we call ourselves in our native language Knyaw Poe. It means that Knyaw is translated into simplicity, or in other words, minimalistic. That's Knyaw. Poe is can be a son, a daughter, or a children. So in other words, Knyaw Poe, if you translate that loosely, it's children of simplicity, children of minimalistic, right? To me, that's the identity that I hold true to myself. That when I vision Knyaw identity, I like to go back to why we call ourselves Knyaw Po. And Knyaw Po, also the people in our language, we also call Knyaw, Knyaw. It's as ethnic group, we call ourselves Knyaw Po, but for people, human race, we call themselves Knyaw Po too. So it's kind of confusing a little bit that we call people Knyaw Po, Korean people Knyaw Po, and then simple people we call it Knyaw Po. And so the term Korean is quite misleading, in my opinion, because it loses that meaning of Knyaw Po. And you might wonder why the Korean people who often wants to live in the jungle want to move away from urbanized cities. This is rooted back to our ancestors, where a lot of folks dis, move away from the city, from urban to the jungle to the hill. That's why we are known as the hill tribe in Thailand, or the hill people in eastern current state of Burma, because the meaning, the Korean people way of life is to live simple, to live in simplicity. And believe or not, if you ask a lot of Korean people who live in the United States, especially the elders, they dream of returning back to Gothule and live that simple life. Want to live as a hunter-gatherer, as a villagers, as a rice farmer, because that's the way of Korean people. And to me, I value that identity of Korean people, of Knyaw Po, because it really emphasizes on simplicity and minimalism. And you look at the Korean clothes, right? It's hand weaving. The Korean bags, it's very simple. It's just a simple bag. And then the Korean people way of life, right? It's dated. It's traced back to our identity as a group of people who migrate places to places to move away from city, urbanized city, just to live the way of the Korean people, to live simple life. And that's what I hold dear to my heart, the identity of Korean identity. But then because of colonialism, right? Where we have Christian missionary, we have uh, Buddhist influence, we have Catholic influence, and then we have language, right? Different language, different tribes, and different tradition. This is why Korean people easily fall into subgroup factions, uh, tiny portion, fall into that. And so religion, the Korean people often, you say in a community there's 100 Korean people, and there are three different groups. They fall into that group, and often when they fall into the group based on their religion or their language, they don't associate, they don't communicate, they don't build relationship with that different faith than they are. And why is that the case? Because I genuinely believe that Korean people don't have this concept of individuality. There's pure concept of collective effort, collective society. And so if the leader of that community is somebody who is, let's say, nationalistic, extreme religious, or like from language perspective wise, if that person don't like the language Burmese or Sagar Korean or poor Korean, they can easily say, we don't associate with you. We don't belong to you. So, and because there's no sense of individuality in the Korean culture, the Korean identity, often those who are interested in power or in decision making have so much influence to influence the whole group of people based on their religions, their faith, and their language. And that's why even here in my community, the way we gather around is not based on our shared identity, but based off our shared identity. But when we gather, we identify folks based on the church that they go to or the temple that they go to. As for instance, when we had this at recent Korean New Year, the way we collect donation was, okay, from this church group we made this much donated to the Korean community, for this temple this much. So we don't go by individually here, we go by the church and the congregation and the temple. So that's why I think that our group are extremely susceptible to division because we associate ourselves with folks that we identify with based off religion, faith, and language.
Right. So that's a good kind of general description of of this very amorphous and diverse Korean community, and can be broken down into many different ways, and also where you personally stand on an individual level of that. Looking at broadening this question to a more historical angle, or perhaps moving up the historical trajectory to looking at the last couple years and certainly the last 20 years. You're describing kind of a static nature of this very diverse community, but of course you have all this extraordinary diversity in all the ways that we've outlined, and then you have this timeline of really traumatic and unstable events that have probably further destabilized them. I mean, the fall of Manerplaw is a key moment. Well, and before what preceded that, the Buddhist Christian split within the Karen, followed by the fall of Manerplaw. That was a really pivotal moment in Karen history that has been really a watershed in terms of what's come since and what's happened to the community. And then, of course, you have the coup of the last 2 years and what's been happening with the Karen resistance to it. You have the resistance taking on many forms. Of course, the Karen that are still in the country, those that are in the border regions, those that are all over the West in the diaspora, and then you have the divergence between the Karen elders and more of like the youthful Generation Z. And so these are a lot of different forces at play that have been responding to these tumultuous events that have taken place. And that's probably further shift, this destabilization I would imagine, has very likely taken the Karen community and posed more challenges in terms of what this identity is, who they are at their core, what they're striving for. This is very different than the natural changes that a community might go through when they're living in the same soil and they're in the same region. Whatever they're going through, the physical place that they're where they live, that's something that stays constant. With the Karen people, you don't have these constants, and you still have these really dramatic, profound events taking place that are impacting them. So taking this definition that you've provided of this overview of what it means to be Karen and who the Karen community is around the world in these different pockets, how would you say the last 20 years and the last 2 years have impacted who the Karen community are, how they're in what ways they're responding, where some of the splits and divergences are happening? And I know that's an incredibly broad question. I mean, this is a question that could be the subject of a whole podcast itself, a whole podcast series itself of how many places to go. But just to take that question at its face value now and answer with whatever first comes to mind of how would you describe the Karen community changing and adjusting with these big events that have happened more recently?
Yes. So reflecting on the past 20 years, I think that the Korean, especially in the border between Thailand and Burma, have largely almost remained the same um, in terms of carrying out political campaigns or resistance, resisting the military. It somewhat remained relatively the same in terms of tactics and in terms of cooperation and collaborated with others. I want to argue that because if you look at from the leadership point of view, right, the leader of the Korean National Union just largely remains older men who are still grew up and lived mostly in the resistance territory. And so, in terms of structural wise, or carry out the political resistance against the military, I haven't seen much differences, right? Even though the KNU continue to advocate to campaign for a federal democracy, right? Things haven't changed much if you look at the leadership and their current positions, especially the those that are in crucial positions in the KNU. A few of them are lifelong, call it politician, and that's their whole life is doing what they're doing is to continue to work in the resistance movement with similar approach. The the only difference I have seen is that the different I've seen in the resistance movement, largely in the current Thai-Burma border, is that the Burmese students, Burmese democratic activists joined them, and they allowed them to serve under the KNU, KNLA, groups, right? And so, in terms of strategy and political campaign, it largely remained the same. But another force that becoming an influential force is the diaspora, which we have seen in the prior to the resettlement of the current refugees here in the United States or through other European or Australia states. And so the diaspora, on the other hand, are largely led by more, say, college graduated youth, young adults. And the influence that this individual, this community, these people carry out is about its financial. Financial play a huge part in the movement, the resistance movement, and so the diaspora, on the other hand, with U.S. currency, a dollar currency compared to the Myanmar kyat, it's very strong, and so international transactions of financial wise supported the resistance movement. There is some sort of influence. There is a power of influence played by the diaspora movement, and it's not play much in the politics because the KNU leaders are very hardcore traditions elders who are in charge. But what the diaspora are able to play to influence the resistance movement is to support the armed resistance, even though they do not, in principle, the Korean National Liberation Army, the armed groups of the KNU, Korean National Union, function under the KNU. However, because the KNU, especially during the 2015 nationwide ceasefire, there's two factions that broke away. And so the KNU leaders that are more less likely to abide by nationwide ceasefire principle, or the armed groups that do not sign the ceasefire, receive more assistance financially from the diaspora community. And because of financial assistance, of course, this play a huge role in the morale of the resistant movement, the resistant groups, and also munitions and arm acquisitions. Why it play a huge role in that, and it's becoming the resistant movement becoming a stronger force in many ways, in terms of military armed support, because obviously money, you can do so much with money that is being transferred internationally, right? And so that level of power play by the diaspora is, we started to see a lot of impact that it had across the Thai Burma border, as well as the international humanitarian aid wise. In the past, we are seeing a lot of, we are not seeing a lot, but in the past, a lot of humanitarian assistance or be carried out by United Nations program or other NGOs. But recently, since the coup, a lot of humanitarian campaigns are carried out by the diaspora, who returns and use their financial strength to do the work that in the past the NGOs or United Nations program carry out. So that's one of the larger trend that I have been observing. In terms of unity wise, I it almost remained the same, if not, it actually fall into two different faction now. You have the supporter of the traditional KNU armed group, the KNLA, and now you have another group of another group called the Kofule Army, a group that break away recently from the KNLA, led by this man named Nodamya. And this group is very much hard core nationalist that have no influence by the larger Burmese politics. So they operate and function across the Thai-Burma border, and they have large supporter in Thailand and here in the U.S. as well. And so, especially a time where we should be more unified, when the larger movement is to resist and topple down the military regime. We're also seeing once again and again breakaway faction, and this is not unique in the Korean history when it comes to having a unified group. And so, if you ask me my personal observations and of the Korean group overall, still I am not seeing significant progress in unifying the Korean groups. However, I'm seeing a lot of unity amongst the democratic activists and the other armed groups that are fighting the military. I'm seeing a lot of unity with the Korean, the Burmese, and the larger other ethnic groups that are unifying in their common goal to resist and topple down the military regime. Whether they can do that or not, it's remain unknown. But that larger movement is quite make a trend, and the movement to build and establish a federal democratic state is becoming widely accepted among the democratic activist organizations and society. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And looking also at this, the question of divisions and unity and everything among just the Karen people, to stick with that, I had a previous podcast interview with Jesse from the Urban Village, actually, of course, the mutual friend that hooked us up and introduced us to each other. And as he was breaking down some of the Karen response to the current situation, he described a real sharp division between some of the younger Generation Z and the elders. And the way he described it really seemed to transcend geographically where he was talking, whether it was here, or the border regions, refugee camps, or actually in Burma. He was describing an elder generation that has long played at a zero-sum game and that had long histories and memories of mistrust among the Bamar and perhaps other ethnicities, and that they were based on those past experiences. They really felt that they're continuing on a struggle that was even pre-World War II, of the Karen people wanting to have greater autonomy and independence, perhaps even their own state, or certainly some kind of special status. Whereas the young generation, Generation Z, wherever they were located, were by and large much more believing in the ideals of federal democracy, believing that if every individual group is just trying to seek their own greater favor and greater protection, that is not going to be strong enough to hold up the whole structure. And it needs to be a society that's fair and equitable to all, not only the main ethnicities in the Bamar, but also the Rohingya, also the Muslims, also the LGBT community, and et cetera, that there needed to be these wider protections. If one person is not free, then everyone's not free, that kind of mentality. Whereas the elder generation saw this, with a greater institutional memory, saw this as a bit naive, and were responding based on things they had experienced, the young generation had not. And so Jesse really described this whole dynamic very interestingly, very nuanced, and just talking about the how it both members of both generations, how things made sense to them where they were coming from given their responses, and how they were seeking these kinds of conversations and understandings, but that sometimes it was a bit hard and a bit tense. And so when you're looking at this Karen response, what have you seen along the lines of what Jesse's described, of the elder generation who's coming with a bit more skepticism and the younger generation that's coming with a bit more idealism towards federal democracy?
Yeah, and I agree with Jesse's assessment of his observation of the divisions and the mistrust between the elder generations and then the Gen Z, or in this case, right? And I think the core of that is that a lot of Gen Z, or the younger generations, have lived in society where there's rule of laws, right? Because there's rule of laws, especially here in the diaspora community. It allows you to interact with people of different color and different language and race and ethnicity to live in relatively peaceful society. And because of that, there is a little room for skepticism, and little room for and there's more room for hope for society, because we have lived through a more diverse society where, regardless of your religion, your identity, you can coexist it with different other, right? You just need a strong rule of laws. Whereas the elder who came from a place where there's no rule of laws, where it's a zero-sum game, where they are the strongest or the most fierce hold power, yes, it makes sense to them that mistrust is common, and not trusting those that speak different language that you are is common. And through their own personal experience, because this is, to them, it's a repeating historical account. When the students, the Gen Z, fled to the resistance territory, right, and requesting to take up arms and to fight the military central government, they themselves have seen this in the past, right? In '88, when there was widespread protest against the military, right? Same thing. The students fled to the uh, territory held by ethnic Korean groups, and as a result of accepting these groups, some some infiltrated by the military intelligence, and they use that to undermine the resistance movement. The fall of Manerplaw was when the military intelligence able to infiltrate the religious institutions and establish their own religious figure to influence decision making, to influence politics, and to instigate divisions. Right? They see this in the past, and when they experience this again, they believe it's going to repeat itself again. When the resistance movement or get tired, when they run out and when they run dry, they are predicted that it's going to be the same thing when students gonna lay down their arms and return back to the city life and live their life as they once did. And to them, that's what they are believe. That's what they truly believe. And they also believe that amongst the resistance fighters, there are Burmese intelligence everywhere, the military intelligence everywhere. And because of that, yes, they have reason to be skeptical. They have reason to mistrust, and they have reason. And I'm not gonna sit here and say that that is we should move over this, right? I'm not gonna say, because I haven't been in their position. I didn't live in the land where people with guns hold power or execute the law in this case. So I'm not going to make that statement, but I agree that the larger older generation tend to be more skeptical, whereas the tend to be more skeptical of this idea of federal system where we share equal power and decentralized power, where the younger generations hope for a more federal union where we can all coexist and live in harmony. And I think that the two differences is based off experience, based on personal experience, personal from where they are brought up, and it makes sense to me. And even me too. Even I advocated for the federal democratic system. Folks around me, especially other youth teenager who have brought up and live within this community, who haven't been exposed to outside of the community, quite think I'm naive and foolish to believe that a federal democratic system is possible for future Burma. And I don't blame on them. It's based off our personal experience, based off our exposure to differences, ideas, race, ethnicity, and even our education background too. It influenced who we are as for that. And yeah, I totally agree with that assessment of Jesse made.
Right. Another thing I'm wondering about is that you because of your story and your background, you've personally been involved with this all your life. I mean, it would be impossible not to, right? Just given what you've lived through and what you face. This has really been your struggle and your cause, and something that has been front and central in every aspect of your life on a personal level, community level, and much wider societal and national level. During the transition period, it's interesting. Some of the people I've interviewed on Inside Myanmar podcast, that some of them have fallen into a category of really having their political consciousness go off on the morning of February 1st, 2021, that they suddenly realized what was going on and what was at stake, and that revolutionized them, that awakened their political consciousness. Other people, such as yourself, I've spoken to, and even during the transition period, they were very skeptical, very expressing concerns, still trying to advocate for things that weren't necessarily being looked at. And for that group of people, which you definitely fall in, the coup was not so much like a shocking wake-up call that galvanized into action, but it was really just a dramatic step along the path that one was already on, and that and that activism and advocacy and work that was already there. This just kind of kicked everything into high gear, but this was not something that was awoken or initiated. This was something that had been building for a long time since, and this just took on a new level. And I think with that, for someone like yourself, you have you definitely have something of a perspective that those that were galvanized to action don't, that were doing their own thing before, or just trying to live somewhat of a normal life with their own dreams, and then suddenly they find themselves sacrificing everything and trying to resist a violent military coup. It's really a kind of a shocking turn of events for so many that fall into that situation. But for yourself, again, like this is something that you lived through, and then professionally, personally in your own life, something you've been doing consistently to this point. And so to ask you the question of what are you seeing now that's different? How are you understanding this current moment? What are your hopes? What are your fears? How is what's taking shape today different from, or maybe similar to, what's happened before? How is it? What is the trajectory of what you're seeing, and what hopes and fears do you have? Anything associated with that, because you have more of an institutional history and a personal history, you're able to respond with this greater perspective of what this current moment means with what's come before it and behind it, that others that were really awoken on that fateful day have not had. So what have been your thoughts in seeing how these nearly 2 years have transpired? What has surprised you? What encourages you? What concerns you have? And where are we at now in terms of the resistance and democracy movement? And what is it going to take to be able to continue to progress?
Yeah, so prior to the military coup, during the short period of relatively peaceful transitional period, there were, despite the nationwide ceasefire agreement and despite the quasi-civilian, democratic-led government, there were still signs of military continuing to conduct persecutions against ethnic minority and continue to violate international law. And if you, as ethnic Karen, of course, we pay attention to what's happening to the Kokothule, Karen state. So we're seeing continuing of violations of the nationwide ceasefire agreement when the military crossed over to marked territory that were agreed, and then not only that, continue to kill the prominent environmentalists and civilians, and armed fighting erupt here and there. And not only that, they continue to build infrastructure for military campaigns deeper into the Karen territory. This stuff we observe and see in broad daylight, but folks that are in the central, you say Yango or central, like in the core regions, are aware of this, because we know that the military continue to carry out disinformation campaign and continue to build narrative of they're the one that is holding the country from falling into separated state and whatnot, right? And the continued ongoing of human rights violation across ethnic areas are not talked about in the mainstream news or medias. And even when we remember having conversation with the State Department, especially with the ambassador in Pa'an, I'm not going to name him, because the narrative and the ideas and the sense I get from him is that yes, it's time of relatively transitional period, and so they, despite us raising concern of human rights violation going on across ethnic territory, and the destructions of environmental and mineral extractions that led to villages not be able to live on their property, their land, and ongoing destructions of houses and villages. The essence I get from State Department and the embassy, the ambassador, was that we are in transitional period. It will take more time. Please be patient. Ongoing conflict will happen, but it's going to change. That's the sense I get. And as somebody who spoke on behalf of the victims of ongoing quote unquote development period, I was very upset with how my representative, State Department, as an American citizen, were viewing and seeing this period. And of course, they discouraged the ethnic Karen National Union group from they discouraged from continuing to cut down on conflict and come to the table and have peaceful negotiation with the military. So I was very upset that happened, and we continued to raise here's red flags, here's red flags. And then in 2017, right, in midsummer 2017, there were Myanmar break international news when it persecuted and forced over millions of Rohingya across the border to Bangladesh. And that this was a huge red flag. And even that this happened in broad daylight, it happens when millions of people of Burma having to flee because they identify Rohingya. Still, the common people in Burma still believe that the Rohingya do not belong in Burma. They are not native to Burma. And so that is the whole reason why even Aung San Suu Kyi herself refused to acknowledge that there were atrocity and genocide was happening and continued to defend the military, right? And so, and her political approach was that if had she stand against the military and advocate on behalf of the Rohingya, we know that the the citizens, the Burmese citizens, will be divided and perhaps might not even vote for the NLD party, and they fear that by perhaps speaking for the Rohingya might cause them a victory in the upcoming election. And because of these political calculations and the majority Burmese stance on issues, me as ethnic person who are pay attention to issue going on around ethnic peripheral, we be raising the issue as such for a long time. And here again, until it come to your front door, matters that or you think that far away from you, will be far away for you. And then, of course, until the coup and military started to come down, knocking everyone's door and kicking and brutalizing its own citizens, that's when the people wake up and start to see the atrocity and the brutality of this military. And we are even seeing that the people of Burma apologize through social media and through so many platforms, acknowledging that they were at fault for not standing up for the Rohingya when this happened. And so for me, like you said, it was not a shock that the military coup occurred. It was almost like deja vu. And despite the military coup, the war in the current state will continue to happen. It will happen for a long time. And the war in Kachin, the Chin state, Rakhine state will continue to happen. Will happen for a long time. Even we may have come to a conclusion where the military can see some sort of power perhaps in the future and allowed some sort of can see some sort of make some concession. The war in ethnic groups, ethnic territory will continue to happen. So that's things that I foresee, that I believe will continue to happen until, of course, the whole country, and which is what we're seeing right now. The whole country stand up for everybody. If one is attacked, all be attacked. If we don't have this mentality that we are all to get in this together, standing against a brutal, misogynist, patriarchal, and Burma supremacist military regime, we won't see much change in the country as a whole.
Right, right. That's a great overview. As we're nearing the end of our discussion for this episode, I realize that we haven't shifted over into what you're doing now in Kentucky. I understand that through your work there, you're continuing in a professional role. You're serving the diaspora community, and have been doing that before the coup. Since the coup, I'm sure that this work has been quite transformed. I also understand that you've led entire protests in the United States, in Washington, D.C., and Minneapolis. So if you could take some time to share about what your life is like there in Kentucky, what kind of diaspora exists there and communities, and then simply what you have in your capacity, in your role, what you're doing now and what you've been doing.
Yeah, so in my professional role here in Kentucky, I work as a refugee resettlement case worker. So I help folks from other countries resettle here in the United States and get accustomed to the United States. I help them by seeking and acquiring and securing social benefit to newly arrived refugees, help them with time to time communicating between government agency and then the local community organization, and sort of providing additional resource to the refugees, newly arrived refugees. That's one professional work. My other unpaid professional work, which occupy majority of my time, is advocate for the issue in Burma, advocate for human rights in Burma, and so I remember before the coup, there were military campaigns, military attacks against the ethnic groups, which led to hundreds of the Korean being displaced, become eternally displaced. We went to a protest in Washington D.C. We led a protest, and we protest again. We protest at the embassy, and we did not have anyone for a Burmese counterpart join us. Majority of us were the Koreans, and we have Few Chin and Fuka Chin, and the protests were covered by Radio Free Asian, but the protest was I helped organize the protest, led the protest, and it was relatively small number because the issue was not emerging in the agenda or the front page of the news or anything like that. So I understand that our Burmese counterpart might not join us that time, and yeah, this is the historical, fortunately historical experience of us when we experience a atrocity, and our Burmese counterpart are not going the same or experience the same thing. We understand that they weren't part of the protest. Then 2 months later, we also organized another protest on February 7th, and the coup happened on February 1st. February 7th is when we organized the protest. Where we went to there, we did see, we went to protest mostly the Karen people, but there were a couple of Burmese who came to join the protest. But at the time they came to protest, and they carry a wide, big picture of Aung San Suu Kyi. And so I got a little bit out of my way, and so I did not allow those individuals to join us because I remember not too long ago, just 2 months ago, we protest against the NLD government for their silence on the atrocity going on in the current state and in Rohingya, in Rakhine state. So, and then that protest was mostly the Korean, or number was relatively low. But once the coup took off in February 1st, and a few days later, we led another protest in Washington, D.C. on March. And that was the largest protest organized by the diaspora population, both all the Burmese, the Chin, the Kachin, everybody joined hand in hand. And that was perhaps one of the largest Burmese, Korean, and other diaspora protests, perhaps in Washington, D.C. And that was just one of the few protests we had led where we had Burmese counterpart join us all together in unity. And so that was that gave us some sort of hope that what we had experienced, our Burmese counterpart are experiencing currently. And there we held another protest, multi-ethnic protest in the Minneapolis, St. Paul. And that was another pivotal point in a unity where, regardless of ethnicity, we were able to come together and held the protest at the Minnesota Capitol. And so these events, it just tell me again and again, confirm my observations of Burma politics, that, you know, unless issue come out front door, we are seeing that our other counterpart, Burmese counterpart, are coming and join hand in hand until a major event as the coup happened. And so what we're seeing now is that, yes, there is a common ground that this military regime, they have to go. And there's no question in that. They have to go. And so because of this common mentality, common desire, we're able to come together. But this is not a recipe for the future of Burma. This is just the first approach of combating military regime as such. And so long way to go. Even, federal democracy charter was outlined, was provided by the NUG. Still, what that implication look is long way for its way to go. So while I am optimistic, but I'm consciously optimistic about the future of Burma.
Yeah, aren't we all? Are we all at this moment? It's definitely an interesting time that we're all living through, and really hope that we can get through this to see a future that could really rewrite the history of anything that's existed, not just in Myanmar, but that in that whole region. And it's brilliant what the sacrifices that so many people are making, what they're working towards to try to create and that vision. And one can only hope that they're able to forge that path. And each one of us, you, me, listeners, people out there, all have their part to play in trying to do that little bit to add it to that right direction and continue following and supporting what's been going on. So with that, before we close, is there anything else you'd like to say that I didn't ask, or something you'd like to bring up before we end the discussion?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for providing this platform for our all of us who are from Burma, who genuinely and dearly love the country of our birth, the country that never experienced genuine democracy. And this country, I know the people are resilient, the people are strong, the people are kind and genuine. And during that short period where we were able to experience a bit of interaction, engagement, and cooperation with one another, we made major progress. However, long way to go, because this military ripped and stripped away the dream and hope of the people of Burma. And so all of us who are sharing our voice in this platform get to share the side of our experience and our thought and observation. So just want to say thank you for this platform, and I hope that in the future we're able to join each other in hand-to-hand in person to talk about the better side of Burma, where the military are not in the discussion.
Many of you are quite familiar with our nonprofit, Better Burma, which was formed in the weeks following the military coup and carries out humanitarian missions around the country. But did you know that we also have a shop that carries handicrafts sourced from artisan communities throughout Myanmar? We take great pride in all of our products being 100% Myanmar made, from the materials to the design to the workmanship. From the Thanaka artfully incorporated on the dolls' faces to the cats and frogs wearing scarves made of traditional Lungji fabric, they all clearly show they were made in the Golden Land. So your gift will bring a little bit of authentic Myanmar into the home of its recipient, and even if just a little, will help keep the people and culture alive in our hearts. And most importantly, your purchase will not only support the livelihood of the artisans, but also help fund our wider humanitarian and media missions. Please take a moment to visit our shop at alokacrafts.com. That's Aloka, A-L-O-K-A, crafts, C-R-A-F-T-S, one word, .com. Of course, as is your preference, you can also consider making a donation through our normal channels. If you would like to join in our mission to support those in Myanmar who are being impacted by the military coup, we welcome your contribution in any form, currency, or transfer method. Your donation will go on to support a wide range of humanitarian and media missions, aiding those local communities who need it most. Donations are directed to such causes as the Civil Disobedience Movement, CDM, families of deceased victims, internally displaced person IDP camps, food for impoverished communities, military defection campaigns, undercover journalists, refugee camps, monasteries and nunneries, education initiatives, the purchasing of protective equipment and medical supplies, COVID relief, and more. We also make sure that our donation fund supports a diverse range of religious and ethnic groups across the country. We invite you to visit our website to learn more about past projects, as well as upcoming needs. You can give a general donation or earmark your contribution to a specific activity or project you would like to support, perhaps even something you heard about in this very episode. All of this humanitarian work is carried out by our nonprofit mission, Better Burma. Any donation you give on our Insight Myanmar website is directed towards this fund. Alternatively, you can also visit the Better Burma website, betterburma.org, and donate directly there. In either case, your donation goes to the same cause in both websites except credit card. You can also give via PayPal by going to paypal.me/betterburma. Additionally, we can take donations through Patreon, Venmo, GoFundMe, and Cash App. Simply search Better Burma on each platform and you'll find our account. You can also visit either website for specific links to these respective accounts or email us at info@betterburma.org. That's Better Burma, one word, spelled BETTERBURMA.org. If you would like to give it another way, please contact us. We also invite you to check out our range of handicrafts that are sourced from vulnerable artisan communities across Myanmar, available at alokacrafts.com. Any purchase will not only support these artisan communities, but also our nonprofit's wider mission. That's Aloka Crafts, spelled ALOKACRAFTS, one word, alokacrafts.com. Thank you so much for your kind consideration and support.